Okay, so negative powers on these guys. I think we know what that means. That we have to put 1 over. So it's 1 over x minus 1 over 6. And this is going to be 1 over x squared and 1 over 6 squared. So negative powers, you remember they flip right where they're at, like that. So yeah, let me mention over here step number 1. Negative powers. Remember, they cannot jump over the big bar when we have adding, subtracting. I don't know if you've noticed, whenever we have adding, subtracting, a lot of things are not allowed. And so one of them is like, no, you can't just say, oh, this x just jumps down here and this one just goes up here. So it'll just be x squared on the top and regular x on the bottom, you know, and this guy goes down here and this guy goes up here, 6 squared on the top, 6 1. That's what we would do if there were times. If it was times and times, because we've done that before. You might be thinking, Mr. Aaron, didn't we do that before where negative power, you always tell us negative, they're negative, they're unhappy. They're like somebody that's negative at their job. They're unhappy. They're going to jump to the other side, a new job, the other side of the fraction. Then they're happy. Then they're positive powers after they jump to the other side. That's true unless you have adding, subtracting. I don't know if you've seen that pattern. So now when you have adding, subtracting, you cannot just jump to the other side of the big bar. That's illegal. Instead, if it was times, you could. Did you understand that? If that was multiplied, these were times, that'd be exactly the right thing to do. But when they're adding, subtracting, they just jump in place. They still jump. See how they still went under a bar, but they have to go under the little bar right where they sit. They can't jump to the other side of the big bar. That's just like we can't cancel things, right, across a major bar when we have adding, subtracting. Adding, subtracting really tie our hands in a lot of ways. Okay, so now what do we do? Well, that means now we have fractions over fractions, don't we? Complex fractions. We don't like that. We want to simplify that. We don't like it's big and ugly. It comes up all the time in higher math and science and engineering and stuff. So what do you do? Well, so again, when there's adding, subtracting, it's like I'm always saying, when there's adding, subtracting, we cannot cancel. Instead, what do you do instead? Multiply all the terms top and bottom by LCD over 1. So I'm going to multiply all the terms on the top and the bottom by the LCD over 1. And what's the LCD? It's 1 of each type of term under a small bar. And for repeats, take the highest power. For repeats, take the highest power. Remember that? So for example, I'm going to look at x and x squared. I'm not going to take both of those, right? Only one of each type. And which one am I going to take? The highest power, x squared. And when you got 6 and 6 squared, same thing. I'm not going to take both of those. You're only going to take one of each type of item that's under a small bar. Which one? The higher power, the 6 squared. So I'm going to take x squared and 6 squared. So the LCD is going to be x squared 6 squared over 1. X squared 6 squared over 1. X squared 6 squared over 1. X squared 6 squared, whoops, that's not good, over 1. All four, right? All terms, top and bottom, by the LCD over 1. So that's the LCD, x squared, 6 squared. You just take one of each type to the highest power when there's repeats. Okay, and now what do you do on step 3 here? Step 3. cancel all denoms. So cancel all the denoms. Come on down here. All right, so here we go. This x cancels one of these, and we have x6 squared. That makes sense, this right here. Now I'm going to make that 36x in a minute, because that's what it is. 6 squared, 6 times 6, 36. I'm going to put the number in the front because that's just how we're used to seeing it. So I'm going slow. See what happened there? This x canceled one of those two x's in that power. All right, how about over here? This guy cancels one of those guys, and it's 6x squared. All right, how about here? X squared cancels x squared, and we're left with 6 squared. And what happens here? 6 squared cancels 6 squared, and we're left with x squared. All right, and then what is that on the next line? This right here is 36x minus 6x squared over 36 minus x squared. Okay, so now step 4. What are we going to do? Well, again, we when there's adding, subtracting, you cannot cancel. Instead, what do? Factor, right? Can't cancel. So we're going to factor. So how are we going to factor? Well, the 36x and the 6x squared, they have in common 6 and x. I don't know if you caught both those, right? 36 is divisible by 6, and so is 6. Leaves a 6, leaves a 1. So that, and then they both have an x. So what's going to go in here? The 6x times 6 would go back to 36x. And 6x times x, 6 times x would go back to 6x squared. Like that. And then on the bottom, we're going to do multiply, because they have nothing in common. 36 and x squared have nothing in common. We're going to do the multiply. 6 is in the front, x is in the back, right? 1 plus 1 minus, because 6 times 6 is 36, and x times x is x squared. You got to have a positive and a negative to make negative x squared. Now we can cancel. What can we cancel? This and this, right? So we're finally there. What are we left with? We have 6x on the top, 6 plus x on the bottom. We're done right there. We can't cancel, right? Why can't we cancel those 6's and those x's? Because of the plus, right? When there's adding, subtracting, you cannot cancel. And so we're just done right there. That's the final answer. We can't cancel anything else out. That's just it right there. That last step we had to factor out, which was a tricky step. So there we go. So again, from the beginning, negative powers, they cannot jump across the major bar when you have adding, subtracting. If we had times, they would just jump across the major bar. That'd be easy. But adding, subtracting always makes everything hard. You got to jump them in place. And then you got to do the LCD, which is one of each type of item under the small bar. Repeat to take the higher power. So we had to take x squared and 6 squared over 1. So all 4, then we cancel. All denominators brought down. What was left over, cleaned it up. And then, again, we can't cancel here because of subtracting. So instead, we factor. We factor out a 6x. They have 6x in common. On the bottom, we do the multiply factor, and then we can cancel the 6 minus x's. And there we go. That's a tough one.